Will a ceasefire in eastern Congo stop the fighting? M23 rebels most responsible for the violence say the deal does not apply to them. As peace talks conclude in Luanda, those suffering through the DRC conflict say leaders have wasted their time. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the M23. This week, leaders from Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and Angola met in Luanda. The summit was aimed at finding solutions to the crisis in eastern Congo. And in the end, it produced a questionable ceasefire agreement. A resurgence in fighting there has caused a major diplomatic rift between Rwanda and the DRC. Kinshasa accuses Kigali of supporting the M23 rebel group. In August, the United Nations backed those accusations, saying it had solid evidence. But Rwanda denies this. The Tutsi-led M23 group has been waging its most serious offensive in eastern Congo since 2012, further destabilizing an area where armed groups have fought over land and resources for decades. The UN says nearly 300,000 people have been displaced by the latest fighting, which erupted last month. So who are the M23? Let's take a look.
Recent fighting in eastern Congo has seen the M23 group capture strategic towns in the North Kivu and Ituri provinces and make advances towards the provincial capital, Goma. But the group is not new to the area. Their history dates back to a decade ago. On the 23rd of March 2009, the Congolese government signed a peace deal with the political armed militia group, the CNDP. But when they felt the deal wasn't being implemented properly, hundreds rebelled against the government and formed the M23 in April 2012. Soon the group, mostly made up of ethnic Tutsis, grew in strength and captured large parts of the resource-rich North Kivu province. Human rights groups have accused the M23 of committing war crimes, including the rape and execution of civilians. According to a UN report in 2012, both Rwanda and Uganda had been arming the rebel fighters and sending troops to aid their insurgency in eastern Congo. Both countries deny these claims. In November 2013, the Congolese army, backed by UN troops, cornered the group and defeated them. Within hours, the M23 said it would disarm and engage in political talks. A month later, the government and the rebels signed a peace deal in Nairobi. But after 8 years, the M23 resurfaced and a year of fighting commenced. This week, a ceasefire was declared. Whether it holds is yet to be seen.
The ceasefire says the M23 must withdraw from occupied territory or face an intervention by regional forces. On Tuesday, Kinshasa said it would not sit down for talks with M23 rebels until the group withdrew from the areas it controlled. But the M23 says a ceasefire is usually between two warring parties, and they were not given a seat at the table. So they plan to stay where they are.
This political dialogue, in whatever form, is between a head of states and armed groups to whom they want to make a peace offering. If there's a group that refuses, that does not take the hand, they are going to be considered negative and fought by the regional force. We forget that the regional force is not only for the M23, but for all the movements there.
Meanwhile, hundreds in the city of Goma have taken to the streets to protest the ceasefire agreement. They say it does not tackle Rwanda's alleged support for the group. The march ended at the French and British consulates, where a memorandum was read out asking foreign powers to sanction Rwanda and Uganda for their reported involvement with the M23.
We demand that the international community as a whole call on the Rwandan and Ugandan heads of state to urgently remove their fighters camouflaged under the M23, RDF, UPDF label, to sanction Rwanda and Uganda for aggression against the DRC for more than 25 years, to establish a special tribunal in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo to try those responsible for atrocities and crimes committed from 1996 to the present.
So with the conflict becoming ever more convoluted, can anything truly quell the violence? Joining me now to debate that are from Leicester, Michael Tshibangu. He is a political advisor for the DRC opposition leader Moise Katumbi. In London, Vava Tampa, the founder of Save the Congo. And also from London, Temitope Olodo. He is a preventative terrorism expert and president of Africa Security Forum. Thanks all so much for being with us. Temitope, I'll start with you. The ceasefire should have been good news, but nobody really seems to have high expectations for it. Does the M23 have a point in saying, why would we adhere to any ceasefire agreement when we were given no role in negotiations?
There's no doubt that this is a situation that requires a political solution rather than a military solution. Bringing them on the table, I think, is important. It needs to be an inclusive approach. I'm not saying that they need to be actively involved, but they should be recognized. There's no doubt. It's more like a deja vu, if you want to say, because far back as 2017, if I'm right, they were concerned about the fact that the UN asked them to leave Goma, and they did, and some of the promises that were made to them were not fulfilled. And across Africa, we've been seeing different conflicts, and I think all the leaders that are getting involved in this issue need to really come together and find a lasting solution to this war. We have a humanitarian situation where we have more than 5 million internally displaced people, the largest in Africa. I think we need to find a political solution, and we need to find it as quickly as possible.
Okay, Vava, I know you disagree because you believe the M23 is fully at fault here. So help us understand at this point, if the M23 does not come on board on the ceasefire agreement, then the alternative is to militarily push the M23 back. But which forces could honestly do that?
Right. I think Femi is wrong. For a start, there was no M23 were not active in 2017. I think he means 2012. M23, and there is neither a political solutions or a military solution. We have tried all of these for the past 25 or 30 years. They have all failed. The solution which we actually need to put in place and implement is a judicial one. At the heart of the humanitarian crisis engulfing Congo and the wider region, it's impunity. You have a region in which every single president is a former warlord. So you have Kagame in Rwanda, Museveni in Uganda, you have similar situation in Burundi. All of those people responsible for a lot of atrocities in Congo. Kagame essentially is in power because British and Americans want him to be in power. And Kagame is able to continue to fuel and abate and aid violence in Congo because of the money and the guns he receives from the British and the American. And everyone understands, everyone knows that M23 does not exist. What exists is a satellite militia gang of Paul Kagame, who are essentially have been killing in Congo since 1998. So you have in 1998 something called RCD Goma, okay, which in 2006 becomes CNDP. And in 2008, your viewers would remember when the entire world were essentially celebrating the victory of Obama becoming the first Black president in the US, CNDP, which were armed, funded by Kagame, killed 150 people in Kiwanja. Because of those atrocities, in 2012, they rebranded themselves as M23 under the leadership of James Kabarebe. That's not what I'm saying. This is what the UN document investigation have said. In fact, in 2012, we had sanctioned by the British, the American, the French, the Dutch, the Germans, and everyone sanctioning Kagame because of its support of M23 militia killings in Congo.
Okay.
And 10 years later, M23 has resurfaced again. So the political solution have failed. The military solution have failed. The one element which we haven't tried, which we ought to try, is the creation of an international criminal tribunal for Congo to end the impunity fueling Kagame, M23, and other people similar to Kagame in Congo.
I mean, Michael, I'll get your take on that. If you agree that the other solutions have failed, is there a potential judicial solution here? But my question would be, how would that even begin to be enforced when you still have all the military elements on the field with their arms, still willing to fight?
Well, the main thing will be to have the M23 fully disarmed. And as we know, this is not the first time that we've seen this conflict. A conflict that started since 1996 in Congo. All we have seen is different armed groups changing names, but continue with the same battles. As it has been mentioned earlier, we had the RCD changed name, then became CNDP became M23. M23 was split into two groups. You had M23 Bosco and M23 Makenga, and today we're back with another M23. So to get a solution, we have to get to the bottom of this situation. The bottom of this situation is that we have a neighboring country that is sponsoring armed groups in DRC. And this is documented in all the UN, in a UN group of experts report. Over the course of years, you even have the UN mapping report, which catalogs a number of atrocities or number of incidents of looting of DRC resources. And so to understand, to deal with this issue, we have to say, Rwanda has to stop doing what it's doing in DRC. The rest are pretexts, excuses that are used to invade and to destabilize DRC. For example, in 1996, we were told that it was for democracy. They took harm for democracy, but once in power, we didn't see democracy. So it's important that we address the cause and we tell Rwanda, and they found ways, if they have to sanction Rwanda, it should be done, because I think that's one way we could ensure that there is lasting peace in the DRC.
Okay. Temitope, then, I mean, if Rwanda is supporting the M23, which it says it's not, what is it getting out of it? And why would it be worth continuing this fight for Rwanda?
I think that's the paradox. That is the misery of this whole issue. We know there is the resource issue, which my two colleagues have more or less elaborated on, the change of nomenclature. I think the regional force could help. Of course, I know my colleague disagreed that there might not be a military solution. We've seen military solution work effectively in West Africa with the ECOMOG. At least it worked to some extent. I'm hoping that with the Eastern Bloc coming together, there might be a solution. But there is still need for an international intervention. And I think, just like he rightly said, if there is that judicial criminal kind of court that is being set up to look at some of the individuals that committed atrocity, including Rwanda, that have continually denied their involvement in this issue, that might be a solution. But there's no doubt in my mind that a political solution is the best way forward, because at the end of the day, we just keep on having the same deja vu. You know, they change their names, they are accusing the fact that they have family members that have been slaughtered or being killed. They're going into, they said they left Goma because they were asked to leave Goma, and then UN went after them. So there's a lot of throwback accusation, whether we like it or not. That is the current situation on ground. And I know all these presidents and former presidents coming together and talking and giving ultimatum. The bottom line is M23 is being funded and they've got weapons to fight a war, and there will be casualty. Casualty is not politicians. It's the ordinary people on the ground that are not even enjoying the benefit of the mass resources that is in Congo, which should be to the benefit of the Congolese and even the continent Africa.
Right.
That's my
Vava, let me ask you, I mean, I can see you disagree with enough of what you heard, but if you're not on page with a political solution here, did it also say something to you that Rwandan President Paul Kagame did not attend this meeting in Luanda? He sent his foreign minister instead. Was that making a statement of sorts that the highest levels of the Rwandan government aren't really interested in this negotiation, or are we reading too much into that?
Well, you're absolutely right, but I just want to go a step back. I can count over 20 peace deals done under the UN umbrella, the EU, the African Union umbrella, the SADC umbrella, and the East African umbrella, all over 20. They have not worked. We cannot continue to employ a strategy that has not worked. I know this as a Congolese, with someone with loved ones and friends are living this nightmare. The political solution have not worked. We know the military solution have not worked because in 2012, we were able to flash out the M23 militarily, 10 years later, they've come back. They have displaced over 400,000 people. So it has not worked. Before the 2012, we had dozens of other military campaign under the UN, in joint military campaign with Rwanda, with Uganda, with Burundi, with the whole of SADC coming together and fighting in Congo. They have not worked. Take it from a Congolese person who has studied this subject, who has loved Rwanda on the ground. They have not worked. The one element which has not been tried for the past 25 years is to end the impunity which has been fueling people like Kagame, Museveni, and their disciples on the ground. Now, to go back to your questions, Kagame, of course, Kagame doesn't care because Kagame is funded and armed by the British and the Americans. Kagame, there are evidence showing how troops from Rwanda have crossed into Congo to kill and to displace people. Yet, in spite of those evidence, neither has the British or the American stopped sending Kagame money or guns. Why would Kagame care? Of course he doesn't care. This is
I'll tell you what.
The end of impunity.
Vava, I'd like to give everybody equal time. And as I said at the beginning of this discussion, this is an incredibly convoluted conflict. And yes, there are major geopolitical issues as well involved with the support of arguably major global players with other interests in the region, inadvertently perhaps giving support to different players involved in this immediate conflict. But Michael, there's another issue here because even regionally, many are asking about Uganda's role. There were also protests in the DRC against Yoweri Museveni for perpetrating violence in eastern DRC as well. And then the solution that was built into the ceasefire that was drafted in Luanda is also about bringing in a regional force to help take the M23 out. How could that even work when there are so many conflicts of interest built into the regional powers in this area?
Indeed, that's one of the main problems that we have in the east of DRC. If you look back historically, you'll find that Uganda as well, as much as Rwanda, has been supporting armed groups in the east of DRC. In fact, Uganda has been found guilty by the International Court of Justice in order to pay over $3 million to DRC as compensation for its role into looting and other crimes committed in the east of DRC. So we're finding ourselves with countries that benefit from instability from the DRC, countries that have sponsored terrorist groups, armed groups, to create a climate of instability that allows them to easily smuggle the resources that are found in the east of DRC. So one will be very careful when you see the same countries that have looting, that are also, those countries are called to restore security. Is it really in the interest to stabilize DRC? Is it really in the interest that there be peace in DRC? Whilst we know that a lot of Congolese gold, coal, and other resources are being exploited by countries such as Uganda and Rwanda. So I think that process is slow. So for that reason, I don't really think that the EAC force can work because of the conflicting interests that are within the ECAC itself. And also on the ground, you have conflicting accounts. The Congolese people were expecting a force that was coming to forcefully disarm the M23. But in the end, there are mixed ideas whether it's going to be a force that comes to disarm or act as an interposition force. That's a force that we stand in between the Congolese army and the rebels. And something that the Congolese people do not want to see. They would much rather see the M23 disarmed forcefully. But to put an end to this conflict, one would have to look at the role of Rwanda. If we don't deal with Rwanda issue, this will pop up again. We will have another group with a different name, and they will fight again and wanting and claiming perhaps that they want democracy or other things. But when you look at the way they are managing the territories that they control, you won't find anything democratic about it. So Rwanda, the role of Rwanda would have to be looked at.
Okay. Temitope, let me come back to you because we'll return to the issue of the global power brokers at play here. You know, France, the UK, for example, which still actually has a deal with Rwanda, not yet enforced, but it still has Rwanda taking money to host UK asylum seekers, a significant amount of money. Are, again, these real conflicts of interest at play? Could they actually stop or prevent stopping this conflict by actually being able to hand Rwanda some kind of ultimatum when they have their own financial interests and other elements at play. Total as well, we have to mention, has the protection, some say, of Rwandan troops in Mozambique, where it has billions of dollars in investment in gas projects there. Rwanda plays a major role in their financial interests as well.
There's no doubt in my mind, and I think my colleague has already mentioned the role of the British, the Americans in this puzzle, and why Africa is the continent where everyone is dipping their fingers and wanting conflict to stay, baffles me. There is no doubt in my mind that if only there could be peace in that region, the amount of wealth, people's wealth for the people and the nation will be immense. And it looks as if everybody is going for their own interest. British is a bit silent because of their asylum issues, and the fact that Rwanda is selected for such. And we know Rwanda also has some issues with human rights that have been highlighted by some of the people, even within the UK government, that have been concerned about some of this issue. So I have real concern, but I think this is an African issue that requires an African solution. Mm-hmm. And one of the African solutions, we need, these world brokers to come in and aid the African solution to this issue. And one of it is what we mentioned earlier, which is just pick these people that are involved and actually make sure that they answer for some of this atrocity they've committed.
Okay, Vava, I can't tell, Vava, if you look actually skeptical or if you agree. Try to help us understand what incentives are actually out there to rally more interest in bringing peace to the region, both in the immediate region and globally.
So I think we've established that without Rwandan support, Kagame support, M23 could not commit the sort of crimes and the killings, the displacement, and the violence they have done without the guns and soldiers from Rwanda. Similarly, we've also established without support from the American and the British, Kagame could not fund and fuel violence in Congo. Now, this leads us to broader questions. My colleague Temi mentioned briefly about an African solutions. Maybe you should also think about this from a post-colonial or neo-colonial perspective. Is it the case that the American and the British are intentionally destabilizing Central Africa on purpose? Africa would become what Congo becomes. There is no, in the whole 54, 55 countries in Africa, no country has more gold, more diamond, more cobalt, more copper, more rivers, more fertile land, more forest than Africa. It's literally, than Congo, it's literally not just the richest, wealthiest country in Africa, but also in the world. And in other words, if Congo picks up, if Congo takes off, the entire continent would bloom. It's the only country that sits right at the heart of the continent, connecting north, east, west, and south. Okay. Without Congo functioning, development in the south will not connect to the development in the north. So the British and the American, there is an argument here to be had, a conversation to be had, are potentially, intentionally fueling insecurity and violence as a way of keeping Africa and that part of Africa.
We're down to our last 2 minutes. Let me get Michael back in the conversation, because now we really do need to put into perspective and understand just how desperate the humanitarian situation actually is now, and what will be the legacy of this violence if these hundreds of thousands of displaced people ever get a chance to rebuild. How will the area even be able to restabilize itself psychologically after what's happened?
Yes, in terms of the humanitarian situation in DRC, I think it's worth noting that this situation has been going on for the past 26 years or so. So the past 26 years, there has been war that forced people to flee, to stop the farming, all the activities that they were doing, and to go and to stay in refugee camp and depend on international aid. This is a war that has led to the raping of thousands of women, families destroyed, children forced to rape their own mothers. So you can imagine the psychological impact that will have not only on the child, but the entire family. And you have people that are continuously killed. There are reports that over the course of time, there's been over 5 million people that have died. And we are still counting the dead because the war is still ongoing. And today, as we speak, we have hundreds of thousands of people who have fled, who have ended up in refugee camps. So when the war ends, they can't just go back and start everything as normal. It's going to take time. And this is why it's really important that the international community take this crisis very seriously. There are innocent people that are paying the heaviest price. Those people have done nothing wrong. All they want to do is just to get on with their life. But yet they found themselves victims because of greed, because countries see Congo as a very rich country, and they want to exploit those resources. They say, hey, this is resources that we can get. And in order to get those resources cheaply, easily, we must just destabilize it. So when there's no control, then they can buy them cheaply. This is what essentially is happening. We shouldn't forget the economic dimension of this war.
And that is why it's called the resource curse by so many. Michael, unfortunately, that's going to have to be the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us. Our viewers, of course, for tuning in as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter. And do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.